So LSU last night, the basketball team has a chance in Gainesville, as we talked about this part of the schedule for the Tigers. This is tough to find a win on this part of the schedule. But last night it seemed like they had a chance. They were down 20 with 15 minutes left in the game. They bring it back and tie it up 78-78 on a three-pointer by Tyrell Ward, with about 90 seconds left. Florida turns the ball over on the next possession as the clock just ticks under a minute. And LSU was not able to get a point there. They foul the next time down. Florida hits one of two, goes up 79-78. They eventually hit a couple of more free throws and extend the lead to 3. Jordan Wright comes out of a timeout, gets a quick 2.
Yep.
Now you're down 1, 81-80. Free throw on the other side from Florida. They go 1 of 2. Florida's up 82-80, and then Jordan Wright brings the ball down, and he shakes up the defender at the three-point line and is looking straight dead on at a wide-open jump shot. He gives the ball up to Will Baker. Baker treats it like a hot potato. He wants nothing
Get it back
to do with the ball. He's like, what do you want me to do with this thing? Gives it back to Wright, and Wright is standing within 3 feet of the rim where he just – it feels like he didn't understand just how open he was. And he almost pulled the string on it a little bit.
It's like he wanted to get it out of his hand just in time. Because whenever you're getting to the paint that quickly and the clock is ticking down, it was make sure the ball's out of my hand when the buzzer goes off, and he just shortchanged it, which is unfortunate because the move at the top of the key, I don't think he expected to have this much,
He didn't expect to be that open, and then Baker's like, oh, shit.
Baker was running to the top of the key. And obviously there's more open in the corner if you want to play that game. But,
just frustrating way to lose.
It's just a bad play.
Jordan Wright did everything correct.
Right.
Until it was just a
wide open look at it. They couldn't.
You can't ask for
you
much
can't
more.
ask for a better look.
But LSU did panic a little bit down the stretch. I think you had 2 back-to-back turnovers where you gave Florida the ball back. They go to the free throw line. They miss one. Then they make. I think they go 2 of 4 from the free throw line to keep LSU within striking distance. You get the right bucket to cut it to 1, and then they make another free throw. Then obviously the sequence of events that finished the game up. But I was watching it kind of in passing. I had it on the TV, and I was like, okay, LSU's down 20. I was like, I'll keep it on, but I'll also probably look at something else. And then you kind of start to see the score trickle down. You're like, okay, this is the second time LSU's done this, where they've gotten down by double digits and they make this big run. And I would say that they had Florida on skates at the end, as opposed to, was it Georgia, when LSU kind of fumbled the bag down the stretch because they had to fight so hard to get back. And you can see that the wheels are falling off a little bit. Florida was didn't want anything to do with that basketball game. They were sticking it on the other end, where it was a lot of back to you to me, then the shot clock's running down.
Well, the zone
to them.
Freaked them out. I mean, Florida was really, for a minute there, it looked like they were going to run LSU out of the gym. I mean, they were dunking on them. They were running out on them. I mean, it was like, whoa, this is going to be a long night. This is going to be a bad finish. And then McMahon goes to the zone defensively, and the game goes into the mud for Florida. And LSU starts hitting shots, but they lost a couple of key categories. Florida was huge in the paint early on. LSU was not executing in the first half. They started to hit some threes in the second half. I think they finished 11 of 21 from behind the arc. You hate to do that in a loss.
You feel like you wasted it.
Yeah, it's almost like a wasted night. But, you see the signs. And, for people looking at an evaluation of LSU basketball here in year 2 of Matt McMahon, one thing that I believe is evidently clear is that McMahon is a heck of a coach, especially when it comes to the X and O in-game execution, in-game draw-up of being able to coach within the heat, coaching the fire, right? I mean, a lot of people go into games with game plans that they've put in on the previous nights or days of practice where you're just standing to that and just hoping that it's good enough to finish the 40 minutes. Because a lot of coaches have now used their staff members to just really bring in recruiters to make sure they can get players. And it's wild to really see sometimes at the college level or at the highest level how little of the actual game some coaches really have from a knowledge standpoint. You know, like just being able to draw things up in moments. Matt McMahon is not one of those guys. I mean, in situations and instances where you've got to get a shot, you've got to get a look, you've got to get the ball in, you've got to defend, you've got to make coaching change. He does it. I mean, in what I have seen of LSU, it's not a coaching problem. The problem is not the coaching. What he's drawing up, what he's dialing into, what he's calling for is there. It's still the lack of talent and the lack of skill. And that's just that's the hard, cold truth of it. I mean, you know, you hate to say that out loud about a college basketball team that, you know, they want to win, they're practicing hard, they're putting in the work, but at the end of the day, they're a middle to the back of a pack league team in a very respectable conference. I mean, tonight's game between South Carolina and Auburn is must-watch television in college basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a two top 15 teams. Like South Carolina's 11, Auburn's 13. The same Auburn team that got blown out by Florida on Saturday. So, I mean, the league is competitive as any basketball that you can find in the country. And for LSU in year 2 of Matt McMahon, it seems like finding the replacement for Wade in the circumstances that the program was in, where it was you got to totally rebuild this thing from the ground up, from the foundation back up. The studs were knocked down. I mean, like there was nothing standing in the LSU basketball program when he took it over just 2 years ago. So to see, you go into Florida, keep it tight, have a chance at the end of the game, or not keep it tight, but get it back to being tight and have a chance at the end of the game. It's still some of the issues that you were dealing with last season. It's not as hyper. It's not as, I mean, some of the talent gap has been closed, but you still have work to do. But you can see if you can close that talent gap, LSU's got a good basketball coach. I mean, there's no denying that. There's nothing, even some of the outcomes of the game. Well, I mean, he loses more than he wins. Well, yeah, I mean, his talent's not comparable to what the rest of the league is. And, I understand they have to recruit. And look, they got some guys coming in next year. A pair of 4-stars are in next year's recruiting class. They did a pretty solid job this offseason of bringing in some guys. I mean, Jordan Wright, Will Baker have been some key additions.
2 best players.
Mike Williams.
Yeah.
In recruiting. I mean, the signs are there. But in the grand scheme of the overall discussion, they're still legions away from where they need to be to be competitive every single night. And, I mean, that's just where it is.
Yeah, because you're going to have to look. I agree with you. I mean, I feel like it's tough to say that. I don't know what it is. Whenever you look at, it feels like they haven't had a cohesive roster yet under McMahon, because he brought in a bunch of guys from his previous stop where they were all going to be here for 1 year, be in Baton Rouge for 1 year. Then the roster kind of turned over a little bit. Now you go back into the portal and you get 2 guys that aren't going to be here next year again, where Jordan Wright and Will Baker, both are graduate students. So you start looking at it like, okay, where's the pieces that are coming back to build off of with LSU basketball? And I do believe you've added 2 at least that you can look at when you have Mike Williams and now Tyrell Ward, both of which I feel like can play. And so if you can start building it out to where you have consistency coming back instead of it feels like you're kind of restarting every year, because McMahon, once he gets a full recruiting class that he can work with from your first year to your third year, if you're able to do that, because I don't think they're going to go get one and done. I think this is kind of the model of how you want to build it, but he still needs that one nucleus like recruiting class that kind of rides with you and you can have some sort of consistency. Well, that seems to be the hardest part.
He's got some guys coming in next season that are some pretty high-end players. I mean, Robert Miller coming out of Pasadena, Texas, he beat some people to get him. I mean, he beat Texas. He beat some powers in basketball to get Miller. Curtis Givens is another one that he got out of Matt Verde in Florida that is a very high-end player. I believe he chose LSU over the likes of Kentucky and Louisville and North Carolina. I mean, he was a big commodity in basketball. And for people saying that South Carolina did it in one season, I know that South Carolina right now is experiencing a ton of success, and head coach Lamont Paris deserves a ton of credit. I mean, not only is he going to be the coach of the league, the coach of the year in the league, he might be the national coach of the year for what he's doing to South Carolina. But when you look at the LSU rebuild and what South Carolina is doing in one season, you have to remember South Carolina at least had a foundation, had a group, had people to work with, right? And guys also that Paris has brought in. LSU, where they were 2 years ago, you cannot compare to anything, not in basketball, in any sport, where you've got to come in and you've got less than a calendar year to rebuild the roster from the entire ground up. Like there was I believe two players.
One, Imani Wilkinson.
Mwani Wilkinson. One scholarship player.
And Adam Miller was here for a month after Matt McMahon got here, and then he transferred.
Yeah, Arizona State.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I know that it can be done, and basketball is a sport that it shouldn't take a long time if you are good, right? Like, I mean, South Carolina, Lamont Paris is obviously a dog, right? I mean, it didn't take him long. Will Wade, hadn't taken him long. McNeese, guy can coach, right? I mean, McMahon, you're starting to see the signs. If he was almost given a program that would have had 8 scholarship players on it last season that could play. You know, that weren't high-end players, but that just were program guys that you could get into the mix and put them on the floor. I mean, he had to find everybody last season. So I'm not excusing him. I'm not saying he gets a free pass. I'm not saying he gets an extra amount of grace for, I mean, at some point you got to win. And, like we've said, sports is an absolute sum game. Did you win or you lose? Did you sign the player or not? And LSU basketball needs to get to a place where they're in the discussion every night to win the game. But I still think that he deserves more time before we really evaluate the overall state of the program under his direction. Because if we are doing that right now, I would say for what he took over to where the program sits here in mid-February of his second season, he's a little ahead of pace to what I expected. I mean, if you don't respect or understand what he took on and has to rebuild in a conference that is beyond respectable in college basketball. I mean, what the SEC has become in college basketball, I think, is as much of a success story under Greg Sankey's leadership as anything. I mean, expanding the teams, getting Texas, Oklahoma, the TV contracts, the SEC network, all of it. The college basketball success under Sankey's watch has been a huge mark of success for the league. I mean, it's a lot like what baseball and football has become. The best players and facilities are and coaches are in the SEC when it comes to basketball. So, I mean, if it sounds like I'm making excuses for McMahon, I'm truly not trying to do that. But you know, he's going to have to win games, and he's going to be held to the same standard as others in his profession are. I think when you look at his situation, it's not like anyone has ever taken on, and it deserves a little bit of a, not
a grace period,
a little bit of an asterisk here to get going. I mean,
he said it himself. He's considering this year one.
Right.
Where the way that you look at it, I think that's even fair to give him, if you want to give him a pass on that. I think that's fair because what he inherited is not something. There's a reason that a lot of people weren't clamoring for the job, I would imagine. But you still are able to go out and get a coach that you feel like is somebody that can do something and win at LSU, and you give him that. He stepped into a situation where it's like Will Smith walking into the house on and the Beverly Hills. He's like, "Where did everybody go?
Yeah,
where's Uncle Phil? Nobody's home." And so you get him wanting to stay. You go and grab some people out of the portal that at least made you look like you could do this last night, where you can be competitive in the SEC. You're not going to win every game you play, and you're not going to make noise as a perennial SEC contender in their first or second year, however you want to view it. But at least you're not getting run out the gym,
right?
Which is, I don't know if that's what people want to hear, but you can see the pieces coming together. You can see that there's something to build upon here. So it's not as bad as it could be.
No, it's not. And look, it's got to get better. And I do believe next season for McMahon is it's a judgment type year. You can make a clear judgment of where the program is. 2 years for anyone is a great amount of time in college basketball to realize whether or not it's going to work. And, from McMahon's standpoint, his first season, I don't want to say it didn't count because there were players, there were season ticket holders, there were people that were there. But from the sense of his evaluation on the bottom line on whether or not his future is going to be in Baton Rouge or not, it shouldn't mark against it. His first season is unfair to look at and say, well, the program was not successful during that year. Well, Adolph Rupp wouldn't have been, John Wooden, Rick, pick a coach. Nobody would have been able to win with the hand that was dealt to LSU basketball last season. So here we want to start evaluating Matt McMahon, what to be considered kind of a year one evaluation. Next season, the program has to be pointed in the right direction, getting players competing for the league title. That should be the standard. It should be a tournament team every single year. So, I think last night, for his, at times, disconnected as LSU looked, down 20 with 15 left to play. There's still signs when you watch. Even the Alabama game last weekend at home. Alabama went nuclear from behind the line. They looked like a team that once they get in the tournament, they're dangerous. But LSU brought it back and made it competitive in a sense where you were like, man, this is a good sign, right? Again, no moral victories. No pat on the back for almost job well done, fellas. But there are signs that if you are looking to put together an evaluation, there's some things that you see where you're like, man, that looks promising. That looks like that could work out. And, one of the things that I don't really get, but I'm sure internally there is the reasons why it's happening. A guy like Corey Chest, we hadn't even really talked about. Chest is Louisiana's best player and somebody who is without question going to put people in the seats. If nothing else, he's an entertainer. He's a guy can play above the rim. He's a dunker. He's a guy that's just entertaining to watch play basketball. And I would think on this team, it would be mindless to play him. It's a little head scratching on why he doesn't play. But like I said, I'm sure there are decisions and reasons internally on why they are choosing to redshirt him that makes sense to the program. I mean, mention that they got a couple of high-end players in Robert Miller and Curtis Gibbons coming in the offseason. You know, you're able to hang on to Corey Chest. I mean, he's a guy that with another year coming back as a redshirt freshman next season alongside Miller and Gibbons. I mean, you got 3 high-end players where people are – you're going to have to really game plan for. Is Jordan Wright a senior?
Yeah, it's a graduate student.
But, I mean, you got Mikey Williams. You got the possibility of a guy like Tyrell Ward who, you know, I mean, I don't know why they don't play him more.
Well, I think you're starting to see why they are going to, because LSU, 9 games this year with double-digit three-pointers, which is the most in a season dating back to 2002, 2003. Like, you can see the imprint of the game is changing a little bit for what Matt McMahon wants to do, and I think finding out kind of what his team skill set is. And he's a part of that, like where they're shooting threes a lot. But on the other side of the coin, they got out-rebounded 43-29. Like, the last time they had it feels like a good rebounding performance was against A&M, and that was the hardest team to do it against. A&M leads the conference in like offensive rebounding, and LSU was able to out-rebound them in A&M this year. So they've had kind of spurts of both, like I said, but it's like if you could put that all together into one big pot, that'd be great. That's how you win basketball games, not just compete.
A couple of comments from inside the huddle. King Z says, "Don't forget about Corey Chester. For the life of me, I can't understand on why he's redshirted." I agree. You and I are on the same page. Evo says, "Dunking and entertaining sounds like something for the Globetrotters. Fundamentals and defense and team play wins basketball games." Yeah, I know, Evo. I'm saying that Corey Chester is a freshman, and why they're not cutting his teeth on this team that's obviously struggling to win and lose is where he can develop those fundamentals and those skills to make sure that he's ready to play in the future. That's all I'm really saying. You rarely see red shirts in college basketball anymore. You don't keep them a long time. I mean, if you're asking me if I would bet that Corey Chest is a 4-year player today, I would probably bet against that. So if he's going to be here less than 4 years, why burn a redshirt year on him? Just throw him out there and get him 6, 8, 12 minutes a night and let him go through the growing pains. And, you know, you'll get in return some high-flying dunks and some people that'll be interested in the program, which is pretty tough to do right now. You know what I mean? There's not this overwhelming consistent interest of LSU men's basketball that's happening throughout the community and throughout the fan base. But a guy like Chest will get people talking and saying, "Hey, I might bring my kid out tonight and watch him play." That was just the only point of it.
You just got to generate some sort of excitement.
That's right. Yeah, just somebody that
kind of makes you sit up in your seat a little bit.
Or
like,
just
okay.
gives you some sense of hope. Right? I mean, like, at the end of this season, you lose Jalen Cooks. Yep. You lose Jordan Wright. You lose Will Baker. Who am I missing? I mean, but right there, that's the majority of your stat lines.
That's all of your,
you know, I mean,
Trey Hannibal.
Rebounding, assists, shots, scoring. I mean, a lot of that is wrapped up in those 3 guys.
Trey Hannibal, Jalen Cook, Jordan Wright, Will Baker, and Derek Fountain is a senior. I don't know if he plays as much as he did previously.
But he's solid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, Fountain is a solid player. I mean, you put him in there and you know he's going to play hard. He's going to get rebounds. I mean, he's just going to do some dirty work for you.
They're probably going to have to go back to the portal again. I think it's probably not as difficult in college basketball as it is in college football. It feels like the portal for college basketball is always – like, you could find a couple of guys because you only need 2 or 3.
Right. I mean, there's only 15 guys on the roster.
Right. So it's not as bad when you think about – because I feel like everybody paints it in the lens of college football. It's like, oh, you need this, this, and this. And it's like, well, I don't know how many people you can get. College basketball, there's guys that you can find to plug and play because I don't think we were all the biggest Will Baker stands before he came to LSU. It wasn't like, oh, man, I can't believe you got him out the portal. But you get him to LSU, you see he can play. Same thing for Jordan Wright. I think that was like, now the more that you see it, where would LSU be without those two?
Yeah.
So it's guys like that you could find in the portal and McMahon can coach them.
Yeah, and I mean, like you don't have guys like Damian Collins would help this team tremendously. Collins is the guy who transferred from Kentucky in the offseason, who was battling injury early in the season. I think, kind of his camp has kind of shut him down for the rest of the year. Carlos Stewart was a big offseason signing at the time, it felt like. I mean, they celebrated the signing. He's another guy who played with Jordan Wright in high school, comes out of the Jonathan Pixley program that, you know for a fact they're going to be well coached, going to be fundamentally sound, going to be skill ready to play. You don't ever see him. I mean, that turnover that Jalen Cook had in front of the bench last night at the end of the game, that was brutal.
And I didn't expect it. Like, that's not a play you expect him to mess up.
No, I mean, that was just brutal. But I mean, like, you have to have some guys that you can trust on the floor that would handle the ball. I thought Stewart was going to be one of those guys going into the season. He just doesn't play, right? I mean, like, he doesn't see the floor. And then, like I said, I mean, Damian Collins would be
he's a 5-star coming out of high school.
and another guy that would be a tough matchup, just on this team. So, I mean, you got some guys coming back. We mentioned Mike Williams. Obviously he's a bright spot. I think Hunter Dean is a bright spot. He's a graduate, though, too. I think you lose him. So, I mean, they got some – they do. He's a graduate. Oh, brutal.